Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video in the Zomu Chemistry video series. Today we're going to be talking about unit of measurements. Now, if you guys saw my previous video, you would know that Zomu Chemistry is now dividing its videos in terms of the big ideas that College Board has on their website. So if you guys have taken a look at the College Board website and looked at the big ideas that they had for AP Chemistry, you'll see that they don't have a big idea number 0. So what I intend by saying big idea number 0 is I want you guys to be aware that the next two videos that I'm about to make are prerequisite concepts that you guys should already be familiar with. And if you guys are not familiar with, you guys should probably catch up on so that the remaining videos that explain the AP Chemistry course and all the topics and concepts that are covered in it will become a lot more easier. So unit of measurements is a prerequisite that you guys should already have been introduced to in some of your math and science classes. So without further ado, let's get started with this topic. So, okay, units of measurements. So, chemistry basically revolves around two different types of observations if we simplify it down. The first type of observation is qualitative observation. And these are the type of observations that rely on your senses. So, if a chemical reaction is taking place, what do you see happening? Or do you see any color changes? Do you smell any odors? Personally, I wouldn't taste anything when it comes to chemical reactions because most of the chemicals that we work with are not good for the human body. But that would be another sensory detail that you could use in qualitative observations. So it's mainly your sight, smell, taste, what you feel when you touch certain metals, or etc., etc. So those are the sensory observations, qualitative observations. Then we have quantitative observations. Now, these are the type of observations that you have to rely on statistics or numerical values for, which we're mainly going to be talking about since the video has to do with units of measurements, which deals with a lot of numerical values and certain wording that explains those numerical values. So we'll explain quantitative observations in detail in the next slide. All right, so in quantitative observation, as I mentioned before, you have to use numerical values to illustrate an idea. And you must have units for those numerical values in order to explain that same idea. So if I said that I have 4 of something, many of you would be confused because I could be talking about 4 apples, 4 oranges, 4 pounds of something, 4 grams of something. People are not really sure what I mean by just saying a number. So that's why we have units. Units help explain an idea and they express the specifics of a certain quantity. So an example of a unit would be grams or liters or atmospheres. Atmospheres measures pressure, which we'll be dealing with when we go into the gas unit further on in AP chemistry. But that is another unit that we can use. But we should be familiar with grams and liters. So that's what quantitative observations are, and that will continue on to really what units of measurements we'll be talking about. So these are really what are the prerequisites that you should already know. So these are the units that you guys should already be familiar with. You guys should have heard of it, maybe worked with it a little bit. So the first one is mass. Mass, we should know, is the amount of matter in an object, and a common unit for mass is grams. Weight is pretty much the same thing as mass, except you're taking into account the gravitational force on an object. So weight would be in pounds or newtons. Temperature, we should all be familiar with, measures the degree of heat in the atmosphere or in the system or surrounding. The C here represents Celsius, the F represents Fahrenheit, and the K, which is going to be very important when it comes to AP chemistry, represents Kelvin. So in AP chemistry, when we deal with temperature in specific equations or specific concepts, most of the time temperature is going to be in the Kelvin unit. So you may have to do a couple conversions with Kelvin. So some problems on the AP test might give you values in Celsius, and you would have to manipulate that value into Kelvin. So in yellow here, I have the equation to convert from Celsius to Kelvin. So Kelvin equals the Celsius measurement that you have plus 273. So if they gave you, let's say, 100 degrees Celsius, we would know that that would be 373 Kelvin, because we would just do 100 plus 273 to get 373 Kelvin. So time we should also be familiar with, measured in seconds, minutes, hours. Distance and length is specifically in meters, also inches and feet, but because we're using the metric system, it'll mainly be in meters, centimeters, millimeters, measurements like that. Volume, we should all know, specifically volume deals with three-dimensional objects and the capacity of those three-dimensional objects. So for example, if we had a cup, the amount of water that can fill up that cup would be the volume. So or the amount of yeah, the amount of water that could fill up that cup would be the volume. So um, uh, volume can be expressed in liters. Cubic centimeters would also be another common unit when it comes to volume. And lastly, we have density. Now, density we should all be familiar with, but if you're not, the way that you can derive density is by taking the mass over the volume. So that's exactly why we have the units that we do. We have the mass, the units for mass over the units for volume. So we have grams over liters or grams over milliliters. So that those are going to be the appropriate units when it comes to density. So hopefully you guys are pretty familiar with these units already, because it will make the course easier down the road. The last slide we have, and probably the most important slide we have, are unit prefixes. Now, I will tell you that on the AP test, and I also know many AP chemistry teachers that love to use unit prefixes, the main reason that they use unit prefixes, first of all, is maybe the measurement is way too big, so they have to use a big prefix in order to make the number actually fit on paper. So if I had like, I don't know, 1,000 grams, instead of writing the whole 1000 grams, I would just put it in kilograms and say 1 kilogram. So it's convenient for test makers to write it out with. And also, the AP exam wants to test whether or not you can manipulate certain units into their correct base units. So, for example, I guess we could say that when we're wanting to calculate molarity, which I'll introduce later, but molarity is a measurement for concentration. So if we want to calculate molarity, we need to have volume in liters. But in some problems, they may say that we have 1 milliliter of solution. So we have to convert that milliliter into liters so that we can solve the problem. So that's exactly why prefixes are so important to know, because we have to be able to take certain prefix units and convert them into their base units. So we may have to convert kilograms to grams, or we may have to convert centimeters to meters. So what I highly recommend is definitely in your textbook. Oh, and I'm sorry, I got out of the PowerPoint here. Excuse me. So definitely in your textbook, there will be a table or a chart that will have all these prefixes. And for the AP Chemistry exam, these are all the prefixes that you need to know. So I highly recommend that you maybe pause the video or you take the time to maybe take a screenshot of this or look in your book for a similar chart. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Excuse me for that. So, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. So, definitely, memorize every single one of these prefixes, because that's going to be invaluable when it comes for the AP chemistry exam and also for some of the unit tests that you guys may have in your chemistry course in school. So definitely memorize all of these prefixes. I will have a video after this that will give example problems of how we can manipulate certain unit prefixes to get desired units. So definitely, if you guys want to see how we can apply this chart into real life problems, take a look at the next video. That's going to give you a good understanding on how we can manipulate our units. But this is going to be very, very important, because I've seen a lot of students that have made mistakes on the AP exam and also on many unit tests because they don't know what some of these unit prefixes are, and they don't know how to convert it in order to in order to match with the equation. So ultimately they'll get the wrong answer, which is going to be horrible when you're doing a very long problem and you get one of those units wrong and your whole answer gets screwed up. So it's very good to take, the the time to just memorize all of these prefixes and their order magnitude, what they represent, so that we can be able to manipulate them when it comes down to doing certain formulas and certain equations. Okay, so please definitely do take the time to do that. Alright guys, so that's really all I have today. This video covered unit measurements and the importance of unit prefixes. Hopefully that if you guys have any questions, please do leave them in the comment section below. Hit a like and please do subscribe. It'll be a great help to the channel. I will have another video of a big idea number 0 part 2 that has to deal with significant figures, which is going to be also another important concept when it comes to AP chemistry. Hopefully this video has been informative. Definitely I do recommend to take a look at this chart and memorize all the prefixes. I hope this has been of great help, and I hope you tune in for more. Thank you.